I was having dinner alone on a Tuesday night when a black car pulled up outside. The man who stepped out wasn't a driver. He walked straight to my table, placed an envelope in front of me, and said 4 words. "You've been purchased, Miss Sierra." I didn't understand what that meant. Not until he showed me the photograph, me, sitting in this restaurant, taken 20 minutes ago, and a number beside it, $2 million. Sierra always ate alone on Tuesdays. Not because she had no one, she had people. A handful of them. The kind of small, careful collection of humans you build when you've learned that large groups of friends require a version of yourself you're too tired to perform. She had Maya, who called every Sunday without fail. She had her colleague Driss, who left coffee on her desk without being asked. She had her sister 2 cities away who she texted in the middle of the night when she couldn't sleep. She had people. She just preferred Tuesday nights alone. The restaurant was small, Italian, 3 blocks from her apartment. She'd been coming here for 2 years. Same table by the window, same order, the linguine with the white wine sauce and sparkling water, and whatever dessert was written on the chalkboard that day. The owner knew her name. The waiter knew not to make conversation beyond the necessary. It was the 1 hour of her week that was completely, entirely hers. She was halfway through the linguine when the black car stopped outside. She noticed it the way she noticed everything. Quietly, automatically, the way her brain had always cataloged the world around her as data rather than scenery. Black car. No plates visible from this angle. Engine running. Nobody getting out. She went back to her food. 2 minutes later, the car door opened. The man who stepped out was not a driver. Drivers wore dark uniforms and moved with the particular purposefulness of men executing instructions. This man moved like the instructions were his. Tall, dark coat. The kind of face that was hard to look at directly, not because it was beautiful, though it was, in the severe architectural way of things built for function rather than decoration. Because it was completely unreadable, like looking at a wall and trying to find the door. He walked straight toward the restaurant. She looked back at her food. The bell above the door rang. She felt him cross the room without looking up. Felt the specific displacement of air that comes with a large certain presence moving through a small space. Heard the sound of a chair being pulled out, not hers, the one across from her, and looked up. He was sitting down. "This is my table," she said. "I know," he said. Miss Sierra, her last name, not her first. The formality of it, Miss Sierra, landed strangely in the air between them. He reached into his coat. Produced an envelope, cream-colored, sealed, her name written on the front in handwriting she didn't recognize. He placed it in front of her and took his hands back and sat with the patience of a man who had decided to wait and meant it. She looked at the envelope. Looked at him. "What is this?" "Open it," he said. "Then I'll answer your questions." She should have called the waiter over. Asked this man to leave. Done any of the sensible things a woman alone in a restaurant does when a stranger sits at her table uninvited. She opened the envelope. Inside, a single photograph, her, sitting at this table. Tonight, she could tell from the dress, the half-eaten plate of linguine visible at the edge of the frame. Taken from outside through the window, maybe 20 minutes ago. And in the bottom right corner, printed in clean black type, Lot 47, Sierra VOSSFINAL bid, 2 million duration, 1 NIGHTBUYR. Confirmed. She read it twice. The words were in English. She spoke 6 languages and understood all of them perfectly, and these specific words in this specific combination made no sense to her for approximately 10 full seconds. Then they did. The cold that moved through her body was not fear. Not yet. It was something more primary than that, the specific deep cold of a person who has just realized the world is shaped differently than they believed. "What is this?" she said again. Her voice was perfectly level. She was proud of that. "An auction," he said. "Private. Invitation only. Your employer runs it twice yearly." He said it the way people say things they've rehearsed saying, without emotion, not cruelly, just factually. Like he'd decided the kindest thing was to give it to her clean. "You were listed as Lot 47. The bidding closed 40 minutes ago." "I wasn't," she stopped, started again. "I didn't agree to." "No," he said. "You didn't know, then how? Your employer entered you without your knowledge or consent." A pause. This is not the first time he has done this with members of his staff. The linguine was getting cold. She noticed that absurdly, the food getting cold, the candle on the table flickering, the sounds of the restaurant continuing around them as if nothing was happening, as if the world hadn't just shifted 3 inches to the left. "Who won?" she said. He looked at her steadily. "I did," he said. His name was Kane. Just Kane. She pushed for a last name and got nothing, which told her something. Men who operated with one name did so because the other one was either too recognizable or too dangerous to hand to a stranger in a restaurant. He told her the minimum, enough to understand the shape of the situation without the details that would send her running. The auction was real. Her employer, Henrik Voss, no relation despite the name, a coincidence she'd always found vaguely unsettling, had been running it for 4 years out of a private club in the financial district. The guests were wealthy. Lots were, she flinched at the word, even in her own mind, employees. Contractors, people who trusted him with access to their time and presence and had no idea he was monetizing that trust to the highest bidder. "What happens," she said carefully, "to the people who are bought?" He was quiet for a moment. "It depends on the buyer." "What does that mean?" "It means the buyers are not all buying for the same reason." He held her gaze. "Some want company. Some want information the person carries. Some," he stopped. "Some are not buying for reasons I'll describe in a restaurant." She understood what he wasn't saying. The cold in her chest got very specific and very sharp. "The man who was bidding against you," she said. "Yes." "What did he want?" "Not something you would have survived," he said simply. "That's why I'm here." She sat with that for a moment. The candle flickered. Outside, the black car waited. "You paid $2 million, she said, "to stop someone from hurting me." "Yes." "Why?" He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved across his face, brief, controlled, filed away before she could fully read it. "That's the part," he said, "that takes longer to explain. I have time, not here." He glanced at the window, a quick professional scan, there and gone. "We need to leave. The man who lost the bid will know by now that the lot has been collected. He will want to understand why his acquisition didn't go as planned." "I'm not an acquisition." "No," he said. "You're not." Simply, certainly, like it mattered to him that she understood the distinction. "But he doesn't know that yet." She looked at this man across her Tuesday night table, this contained, unreadable, dangerously calm man who had paid $2 million for her without her knowledge and was now asking her to get into a car with him, and thought about every self-preservation instinct she'd ever had. Then she thought about the man who'd been outbid. "Where are we going?" she said. "Somewhere safe." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." He stood. "Come with me anyway." She left €40 on the table for the linguine she hadn't finished. She went with him anyway. Chapter 2. What he knows the car smelled like leather and cold air, and something underneath both of those things that was just him. Clean and dark, and not a cologne exactly, just the warmth of a person existing in a small space. She noticed that and immediately found it irritating. There was a second man driving, silent, broad eyes that stayed on the road with the practiced focus of someone trained to ignore everything happening in the backseat. She filed him away, noted the route they were taking. Old habit, she had always been good at remembering routes, directions, the spatial logic of cities. It was why she was good at languages, she thought. Both were about structure. Both were about finding the pattern underneath the surface. "How long have you known about the auction?" she said. 8 months. "And you waited until tonight?" "I needed to be certain of several things before I moved." "Certain of what?" He looked at her in the specific way he had, direct, measuring, giving exactly what was necessary. "That you were who I thought you were, that the information was accurate, that the timing was right." "What information?" "About you." She turned to face him fully. "You've been investigating me." "Yes." "For 8 months." "Yes." She thought about 8 months of her life, ordinary, careful, structured. Her apartment. Her commute. Her Tuesday dinners alone. 8 months of that, unknowingly observed. "What did you find?" she said. Something shifted in his expression. Barely perceptible, a slight softening around the jaw, there and gone. "That you are significantly more than Henrik Voss deserves to have access to," he said. "And significantly more than the man who was bidding against me deserves to touch." The car was very quiet. She turned back to the window. Her pulse was doing something she didn't give permission to. The safe house was an apartment on the 9th floor of a building that looked ordinary from the outside and was clearly not ordinary from the inside. Clean lines, minimal furniture, the specific blankness of a space maintained for function rather than living. 2 exits she counted immediately. Reinforced door. Windows that were slightly too thick to be standard glass. She walked through it nodding everything. He watched her do it. You count exits, he said. Habit. From what? From being a woman who pays attention. She turned. Most women do. We just don't usually say it out loud. He looked at her for a moment. Fair, he said. He made coffee without asking. Put a cup in front of her, black, which was right, which meant he'd done his research thoroughly, and sat across from her at the kitchen table, and she thought, this is the second time tonight a man has sat across from me uninvited, and I have let him talk, she said. Everything. From the beginning, he talked. Henrik Voss, her employer of 3 years, the man who'd hired her out of a competitive pool of 40 candidates, who paid her exceptionally well and praised her work, and had always seemed, if not warm exactly, then fair, had been running the auction circuit for 4 years. It had started, as these things apparently do, small. Favors exchanged between wealthy men. Access sold informally. It had grown into something structured and terrible and very profitable. She was not the first person from his firm to be listed. She would not have been the last. Why me specifically, she said. This time, because of what you translated 6 weeks ago, she went still 6 weeks ago. A document dense, technical, in a dialect of Russian, she was one of perhaps 12 people in the country fluent enough to handle accurately. Henrik had brought it to her personally, which was unusual. Had stood in her office while she worked, which was more unusual. Had asked her to keep the translation between them, which she thought was standard confidentiality protocol. She translated it. Filed the copy with Henrik directly. Deleted her working notes as instructed, but she remembered it. She always remembered everything she translated. It was the gift and the curse of the way her mind worked. Language didn't leave her. It stayed, word for word, perfectly intact. What was in that document, she said slowly. Names, he said. Locations. Financial structures for an operation that certain people would spend significant money to keep buried. He held her eyes. You are the only person outside of a very small circle who has read that document and retained it. Henrik knows this. The man who was bidding against me tonight knows this. A pause. They weren't buying a night with you, Sira. They were buying access to what's in your head. The apartment was very quiet. She thought about the document. Pulled it up from memory the way she always could, page by page, paragraph by paragraph, the specific weight of the words in a language that didn't soften its edges. I understand what I translated now, she said quietly. I know, that's why you waited. You needed to know if I'd understood it. I needed to know if you'd understood it and what you'd do with that understanding. And you did nothing, he said. You went home. You made dinner. You went to work the next day and treated Henrik exactly the same as before. Something in his face again, that brief unguarded thing. You were either very calm or very smart, both, she said. Yes, he said. I know that now. She didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of the bed in the room he'd shown her, clean, functional, a lock on the inside she checked twice, and built the new shape of the world in her mind. Henrik. 3 years of working for a man who had been what? Using her. Saving her for something. Waiting for the right moment to monetize her particular skill in the most terrible way. She thought about small things. The way he'd always praised her memory specifically. The way he'd funneled the most sensitive translation work to her, and only her. The way he'd stood in her office 6 weeks ago watching her work through the Russian document with an expression she'd read as professional intensity, and now understood was something else entirely. He'd been watching her retain it. He'd been waiting to sell what she knew. At 3 a.m. she got up. Walked to the kitchen. Found Kane already there, of course. He barely slept, she could tell already, the way some people carry their sleeplessness as a permanent condition. Sitting at the table with a phone and a tablet and 3 different things open simultaneously. He looked up when she came in. Didn't comment on the hour. She sat down across from him. The document, she said. The names in it, are they people currently operating some? If the information surfaces, carefully managed, it ends careers and prosecutions follow. Badly managed, people die. Which category does Henrik's buyer fall into? Badly managed, he said. Definitively, she nodded. Filed it, and you, she said. Which category? He looked at her across the table in the low kitchen light. This man who had been watching her for 8 months and paid $2 million for a night that he was using to have a conversation. Who made her coffee the right way and gave her a room with a lock and answered her questions without dressing them up. I want the names to surface correctly, he said. Through the right channels. With the right protections in place for anyone who needs protecting, including me, especially you. Why especially? He was quiet for a moment. Not the evasive kind of quiet, the deciding how honest to be kind. Because you're the only person who carries it accurately, he said. The original document has been destroyed. Henrik's copy was corrupted deliberately. I arranged that 2 weeks ago. What's in your memory is the only clean version left. He meets her eyes, which makes you either the most valuable person in this situation or the most vulnerable. Depending on who gets to you first. You got to me first, yes. And what does that make me? He looks at her for a long moment. Safe, he says. For now, she should go back to bed. She knows that. She should go back to the locked room and sleep, and deal with the rest of this in the daylight when everything is clearer. She stays at the kitchen table instead. He doesn't tell her to go. They sit in the kitchen at 3 a.m. with the city quiet outside and the weight of everything between them, and after a while she realizes she's not sitting here because she's afraid. She's sitting here because this is the most honest conversation she's had in 3 years. She wakes up at 7 a.m. with her face on the kitchen table. There's a blanket over her shoulders. She didn't put it there. The chair across from her is empty, but the coffee maker is running, which means he's close. She sits up, runs her hands through her hair, decides she doesn't have the capacity to be embarrassed about falling asleep at a stranger's kitchen table when she has significantly larger problems. He comes in from the other room, looks at her, looks at the blanket, says nothing. Coffee, she says. He pours her a cup. She drinks half of it before speaking again. What's the plan? I need you to do something that will be uncomfortable, more uncomfortable than last night, different, he says. He sits, puts a tablet on the table, a document open on it, dense and official looking. I need you to write down everything you remember from the translation. Every word as accurately as possible. She looks at the document, looks at him. That's everything, she says. If I write it down, it exists outside your head. Yes, which is dangerous if it falls into the wrong hands. He holds her gaze, but right now you are the only copy and that makes you a target. If we create a secured, verified version through the right channels, one that's already in the hands of people who can act on it correctly, you become significantly less valuable to people who want to use you. Less valuable, she repeats. Less of a target. She wraps both hands around her coffee cup. Thinks about the document, every word of it still perfectly intact in her memory, clear as the day she translated it. 6 weeks of carrying that without knowing what it meant. 6 weeks of it sitting inside her like a bomb she didn't know was armed. Okay, she says. Okay, I'll write it. She meets his eyes. But I want something in exchange. He waits. Henrik, she says. I want whatever you're building here to take him down completely. Not quietly. Not managed away somewhere. All of it, the auction, the people he sold before me, every person he listed without their knowledge. Her voice is very level. I want him finished. Something in Kane's face, not surprise exactly. More like recognition. Like he'd been waiting for her to get here. That was already the plan, he says. Good, she says. Then we want the same thing. She pulls the tablet toward her. She starts writing. She writes for 4 hours. He sits across from her for most of it, not watching exactly, just present, working on his own things. Occasionally he gets up to refill her coffee without asking. Once he puts a plate of toast in front of her, she eats it without looking up, which makes him almost smile. She catches the edge of it in her peripheral vision and doesn't mention it. Around noon she puts the tablet down. Done, she says. He picks it up, reads it. She watches his face while he reads, the way it stays controlled and focused until a specific paragraph, and then something tightens around his jaw. He goes back to that paragraph, reads it again. You remembered the coordinates, he says. I remember everything I translate. I knew that. I didn't know. He stops. These coordinates change everything. This is 3 levels higher than we thought. What does that mean? It means the people protecting the men in this document have significantly more resources than we anticipated. He looks up at her. It means we need to move faster. How fast? Today, she nods. Then let's move. He looks at her for a moment. This woman who woke up an hour ago with her face on his kitchen table and has spent 4 hours reconstructing a classified document from memory and is now ready to move on a timeline he just compressed without flinching. You're not afraid, he says. I'm terrified, she says. I'm just not letting it drive. He looks at her for one more second. Then he picks up his phone. They work through the afternoon. She learns things about him in the way you learn things about people when you're working in close quarters under pressure. Not through conversation, but through observation. The way he thinks. Fast, lateral, 3 steps ahead and already accounting for what happens if those steps fail. The way he communicates with whoever is on the other end of his phone, terse, precise, no words wasted. The way he stands when he's thinking, weight on his left foot, one hand in his pocket, head slightly down. The way he looks at her when he thinks she's not watching. She's always watching. That's the problem. He looks at her the way the document looks when she first encounters it in a new language, like something he's working to understand completely. Like she's a text he hasn't finished yet and isn't sure he ever will. She finds it, she doesn't have a clean word for what she finds it. Unsettling, accurate. The most seen she's felt in longer than she can remember. Stop, she says without looking up from what she's working on. Stop what? Looking at me like that. A pause, like what he says, like you're trying to translate me. The silence has a specific quality to it. Old habit, he says, break it. He doesn't respond. But she feels the quality of his attention shift, become more deliberate, more contained, which somehow makes it worse. She keeps working. At 6 p.m. he tells her they need to move locations. Why? Because whoever lost the bid last night has had 24 hours to trace the acquisition. He's already moving, coat on, phone in pocket, the brisk economy of a man who has done this before many times. They'll have this address within the hour. How? Because I let them, he says. I needed them to come to a location I control before I take them somewhere they don't. She stares at him. You used this apartment as bait, yes, with me in it, with both of us in it. They won't move on the location until they're certain of what's inside. He looks at her. We'll be gone before they're certain. That's an enormous risk. It's a calculated one. There's a difference, yes, he says. There is. He holds the door. Do you trust me? She looks at him. This man she met 18 hours ago. This man who paid $2 million to sit across from her in a kitchen and make coffee correctly and look at her like a language he's trying to learn. Ask me something easier, she says. He almost smiles again. Fuller this time, she sees the real edge of it before it goes. Come on, he says. She comes. Chapter 4. Gravity. The second location is further out. A house rather than an apartment, set back from a road that doesn't get much traffic. The kind of place that looks like a weekend property and is clearly something else. It's also, she notices immediately, significantly more lived in. Books on shelves. A kitchen that shows signs of actual use. A coat on the hook by the door that's been there long enough to belong. Is this yours? She says, yes. She walks through it the way she walks through everything, nodding, cataloging. The books are in 4 languages. The kitchen is stocked with the specific precision of someone who cooks properly, not performatively. There are no photographs anywhere. No photographs. She says no. Why, he's in the kitchen making food already because apparently this is something he does, feeds people without asking. Because photographs are evidence of something real, he says. I spent a long time not having anything real. She stands in the doorway of the living room and looks at the back of him, the line of his shoulders, the controlled movements, the particular stillness of him even when he's doing something as ordinary as cutting vegetables. What changed? She says. He's quiet for a moment. That's a longer conversation. We have time. Do we? You said they won't find this location. I said they won't find it quickly. He turns, looks at her across the kitchen. There's a difference. There's always a difference with you, something in his face, that unguarded thing she keeps catching and losing. He turns back to the stove. Sit down, he says. I'll feed you and then we'll talk. She sits down. He makes pasta. She watches him do it properly from scratch with the focused attention he brings to everything. She sits at his kitchen table in his house with his books visible through the doorway and thinks about how 24 hours ago her biggest concern was whether the linguine was getting cold. You cook, she says, when I have time. Do you often have time? No. He doesn't look up. Not often. What do you do? When you have time, he's quiet for a moment. Considering, I read, he says, I run. I cook when there's someone to cook for. A pause. Usually there isn't. You live alone, yes. by choice. He looks up at her then. Direct, by necessity, he says. Mostly, she holds his gaze for one moment longer than is strictly comfortable. Then she looks at the table. What happened, she says. That made this your life. The safe houses and the operations and the auctions, yes. He plates the pasta, puts a bowl in front of her, sits across from her, picks up his fork and doesn't immediately answer, and she thinks he might not, and then he does. I was in an organization, he says, for 11 years. The kind that doesn't have a public name. I believed in what we were doing, or I told myself I did. He looks at his bowl. 4 years ago, someone I was responsible for got hurt because information was sold by someone inside. The same way your information was almost sold last night. She's very still. You lost someone, she says. Yes, and Henrik. The man who sold the information 4 years ago is Henrik's primary client, he says. The same network, the same operation. What we're building now, what you're helping me build, is the thing that ends it. She looks at him across the table. This man with his one name and his house with no photographs and his 4 languages and his 11 years of something that cost him more than he said. That's why 8 months, she says. You've been building this for 8 months longer. But the last 8 months, yes. Since you identified me as a person who'd read the document, he looks at her. Since I identified you, he says, and doesn't finish the sentence the way she finished it. The pasta is getting warm between them. Neither of them is eating. Kane, she says. Don't, he says. His voice drops slightly, still controlled, but something underneath it that wasn't there before. Don't say something that makes the next 48 hours harder. I haven't said anything. You were about to. You don't know what I was going to say. Yes, I do. He looks at her steadily. Because I've been thinking it for 8 months, and it doesn't get easier to put down just because you finally say it out loud. The kitchen is very quiet. She picks up her fork, takes a bite of pasta. It's exceptional. She doesn't say that because if she says something kind right now, she will also say the other things, and he's right that this isn't the moment. This is good, she says instead. A beat. Then he picks up his fork too. Thank you, he says. They eat. The tension between them doesn't go anywhere. It just sits in the kitchen with them like a third person, patient, waiting. After dinner, she finds the file. She's not snooping, she's looking for a phone charger, and he said second drawer in the study, and she finds the charger and also, underneath it, a folder with her name on the cover. She picks it up, opens it. It's her. 8 months of her. Photographs, notes, a timeline of her movements that's thorough enough to be frightening and specific enough to make clear that the person who compiled it had been paying very close attention for a very long time. There are notes in the margins. Small, handwritten in his compressed, precise handwriting. Reads 6 languages, retains everything. Doesn't show fear. Check her hands instead. She looks at her hands. Notes that they are perfectly steady. He would have liked that. Eats alone on Tuesdays. The restaurant is a ritual, not a habit. There's a difference. She's protecting something by keeping it consistent. She reads that twice. He'd understood why she did the Tuesday dinners. He'd understood it correctly. In 8 months of watching her, he had built a more accurate picture of who she was than people who'd known her for years. She closes the folder. She carries it back to the kitchen. He's washing up. Sees her come in. Sees the folder. Goes completely still. How long, she says. 8 months. All of this, yes. The margin notes. He looks at the folder in her hands. Yes, she opens it to the page she dog-eared, reads aloud. She is the most self-contained person I have observed in 11 years of this work. She protects herself the way careful people protect things they've been hurt for caring about before. Kitchen is very quiet. That's not surveillance, she says. That's no, he says. It isn't. She puts the folder on the counter. She looks at him. This man who watched her for 8 months and learned her correctly and paid $2 million for a night he's spending trying to protect her, and wrote margin notes that see her more clearly than most people have bothered to. I was going to say, she says earlier when you told me not to say it, Sierra. I was going to say that I understand why you have no photographs. She holds his gaze. And that you should. He looks at her for a long moment. Then he crosses the kitchen. He stops in front of her, closer than they've been, close enough that she has to look up and he has to look down, and the air between them is the kind that has weight. His hand comes up to her face, not grabbing, just there. His thumb moves along her cheekbone once, carefully, like something he's been deciding whether to allow himself. This is going to complicate everything, he says. Very low, I know, she says. The next 48 hours are, I know, Sierra Kane. She puts her hand over his at her face. I know, it's still true. He kisses her like a man who has been talking himself out of it for 8 months, which he has. One hand in her hair, certain and careful at once. And she kisses him back with 3 weeks of carrying a bomb she didn't know was armed and $2 million and Tuesday nights alone and the specific relief of being fully seen by someone who looked long enough to see correctly. When they break apart, he keeps his forehead against hers. Eyes closed. Breathing, 48 hours, he says. Then what? Then it's done. Henrik, the network, all of it. And then he opens his eyes, looks at her from very close. Then I'd like to take you to dinner, he says. Somewhere that isn't a safe house. Tuesday, she says. I eat alone on Tuesdays, I know. I might make an exception, something in his face, full and real and completely unguarded. Good, he says. The next 48 hours are the longest of her life. Not because she's afraid. She's moved past fear into something colder and more useful. The specific clarity of a person who has decided what they're willing to do and is doing it. But because the work is painstaking and the stakes are absolute, and there is no room for error, and Kane knows all of this and operates accordingly. Focused, relentless, completely professional in a way that would be easier if she hadn't kissed him in his kitchen 12 hours ago. She's professional too. She's always professional, but she's aware of him in the room in a way she can't entirely suppress. The specific pull of a person you've decided matters. The way the air feels different when they walk into it. She keeps working. The plan has 3 parts. The document, her transcription, verified and secured, goes to 3 separate recipients simultaneously. A prosecutor in a jurisdiction with both the authority and the inclination to act. A journalist whose track record shows she finishes what she starts. And an international body that Henrik's network has been carefully avoiding for 4 years. Simultaneously, Kane says, all 3 at once. So there's no window to suppress any one of them. And Henrik, the auction records. He opens a file on the tablet. She sees her own name in it, lot 47, and looks away. Documented. Time-stamped. 14 names of other employees who were listed without consent over 4 years. His jaw is tight. He won't walk away from this. The man who was bidding against you is already being dealt with by people I trust. He looks at her. You don't need the details. She decides she believes him. Not blindly, she's done blind. But she's been watching him for 48 hours now, and she's built her own file on him in her head. The way she builds everything, and what she has is a man who does what he says and says what he means, and has not once, in 2 days of high-stakes pressure, been anything other than exactly what he appears to be. That's rarer than it should be. When she says, tonight, midnight, she nods. Let's finish it. Midnight arrives. She sits beside him at the table with 3 windows open on the laptop and watches him send the files. 3 keystrokes. 3 separate futures set in motion simultaneously. It's quiet. Nothing dramatic happens, no sound, no confirmation beyond the small indicators that the sends were successful. The world doesn't shake. The lights don't flicker, and yet, she feels something in her chest unlock that she didn't know was bolted. Done, he says. Done, she says. He closes the laptop. They sit in the quiet of his kitchen at midnight, and she thinks about Henrik and the document and the auction, and $2 million and 8 months and Tuesday dinners and margin notes that read her correctly, and she thinks, the world is shaped differently than I believed. Not worse, just different. And perhaps she looks at Kane, who is looking at her with that open, unguarded expression she's learned is the real him, the one underneath the controlled professional surface, perhaps differently in some ways that turn out to matter. Chapter 6. After the fire, Henrik is arrested on a Thursday morning. She watches it on the news from Kane's kitchen, the same kitchen. She's been here 4 days now, which started as necessity and has become something she hasn't named yet. The journalist published first that morning, the story going wide and fast and immediately picked up everywhere. The prosecutor's office confirmed action within the hour. By noon, Henrik's face is on every screen, and 14 people she's never met are being contacted by authorities about what was done to them without their knowledge. She holds her coffee cup with both hands and feels something she wasn't expecting. Not relief exactly. Not satisfaction. Something quieter and more complex, the specific feeling of a door closing on something that should never have been open. "Are you all right?" Kane says. He's asked her that every morning. She's noticed, yes, she says. Surprisingly, he sits across from her. He does that, sits across from her, not beside her, like he's still giving her the space to look at him directly and make her own assessments. She appreciates it more than she said. "The prosecutor will want a statement," he says. "From you specifically. What you translated, what you remember, what Henrik said to you when he brought you the document." "I know," she nods. "I'll give it. It will be. I know what it will be." She meets his eyes. "I'm not afraid of it." He looks at her. "I know you're not. You knew before I did. I knew the first night," he says, "in the restaurant. When you opened the envelope and read it and your hands didn't shake." She remembers that. Remembers being proud of her hands. "You were watching my hands," she says. "Like your notes said, yes." "Does it work?" "As a method, with you it does." Something in his face, warm, real, the version of him she's seen more of in 4 days than most people probably see in years. "Your face gives very little. Your hands give everything." She looks at her hands around the coffee cup. "What are they saying now?" she says. He looks at them for a moment. "That you're deciding something," he says. "Something you've already mostly decided but haven't said yet." She looks up at him. "I want to stay," she says, "for a while. Not because I have nowhere to go. I have an apartment. I have a life I can go back to." She holds his gaze. "Because I want to be here." He's quiet for a moment. Long enough that she thinks she may have read this wrong, all of it. The kitchen and the margin notes and the midnight and the almost smile she's caught 3 times now. Then he says, "The Tuesday rule. What about it? Does it still apply?" She thinks about it. Tuesday nights alone, the ritual she protected because it was hers, because it was the 1 hour of the week that belonged entirely to herself. "I'll keep Tuesdays," she says. "But I might spend them here." He reaches across the table, puts his hand over hers, just that, just his hand over hers, warm and certain and careful. "Okay," he says. "Okay," she says. Chapter 7, What's Real? 3 months later, she gives her statement to the prosecutor. Kane sits outside the room, not inside. She does this alone. She needs to do this alone, but outside. She knows he's there. It changes nothing about how she performs and changes everything about how she feels walking in. She speaks for 2 hours. Every word of the document exactly as she translated it. Every interaction with Henrik. The photograph. The envelope. The number in the corner, 2 million. She speaks clearly and completely and without flinching. Afterward, in the corridor, Kane is standing exactly where she left him. He looks at her face, reading it the way he reads everything, quickly and accurately, and says nothing. Just holds out her coat. She takes it, puts it on. They walk out together. Outside the building, she stops on the steps. The city is doing what cities do, indifferent and constant and full of its own motion. People moving, cars passing, the ordinary machinery of life continuing in all its directions. "There's something I want to know," she says. "Ask." "The 2 million. She looks at him. "Where did it come from?" He's quiet for a moment. She's learned to read his silences now. This one is the considering how honest kind, not the evasive kind. "Me," he says. "My own money. 11 years of saving a salary from an organization that paid extremely well for work I'm not proud of." He holds her gaze. "I've been waiting for something worth spending it on." She looks at him standing on the courthouse steps in the afternoon light. This man with 1 name and no photographs and 4 languages, and 11 years of something that cost him and margin notes that read her correctly and $2 million. He spent to keep her safe in pasta he made from scratch and hands that hold her like something worth being careful with. "That's the most expensive Tuesday dinner in history," she says. He looks at her for a moment. Then he laughs, real, full, the first time she's heard it, and it's devastating in the best way. It changes his whole face. It makes him look like the version of himself that existed before 11 years of necessary things. She decides she's going to be responsible for that laugh as often as possible. "Come on," she says. "I'll buy you coffee." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." She starts down the steps. "I want to." He falls into step beside her. They walk into the city together, not holding hands. Not yet, just side by side, with the specific ease of 2 people who have stopped pretending the pull between them isn't there and started letting it be exactly what it is, something real. In a life that had been full of things that weren't. That Tuesday she eats at the Italian restaurant again. Same table, same window, same order. He sits across from her. The owner, who has known her for 2 years and has never seen her bring anyone to Tuesday dinner, raises an eyebrow. Sierra shakes her head very slightly. Don't, she says. He brings them wine instead. Unbidden, she picks up her glass, looks across the table at Kane, who is looking at the menu with the focused attention he brings to everything and also watching her in his peripheral vision and pretending he isn't and doing it badly, which is new, which she loves. You're starring, she says. I'm reading the menu. You're doing both. He looks up, meets her eyes, doesn't deny it. Old habit, he says. I told you to break it. I'm working on it. Work faster. He almost smiles. The real one, she knows all three versions now. The contained professional one, the almost there one. And this one, the full one, the one that changes everything. Give me time, he says. You have it, she says. She means that in every way it can be meant, he knows. Outside, the city moves. Inside, she finally stops counting exits. She's already home.